It took them 10 days to get from Lothlorien to the waterfall of Tol Brandir. It's a full chapter in the books, and it's 10 days. And there's a whole heap of stuff that happens from one section of Lothlorien to the end of Tol Brandir. From Legolas seeing an eagle hunting an eagle, which feels weirdly prophetic, to Sam being deeply uncomfortable in the boats, and everything in between. But I want to talk today about the 3 things that really caught my attention in this chapter because there were crazy things that happen. One of them is in the books, and the other 2 aren't really in the books. One of them's kind of in the books in the extended edition, but we'll talk about it as we go. I was going to make a video on each one, but I just want to talk about each of them briefly because one of them, I don't really have the full story yet, and I just want to make a point of it before we go into the next chapter, where the really juicy stuff will happen, I'm sure. The other one is just wild speculation based off something that Legolas shoots in the dark. And the final one is just another brilliant piece of writing on Tolkien's part that I want to highlight. But before I jump into it, make sure you like this video and subscribe, as I am going through Lord of the Rings for the first time and publishing my thoughts in the form of video essays. If you want to vicariously live through my experience as I experience these books for the first time, make sure to go back to the channel and watch the videos in the playlist where all the Lord of the Rings videos are kept. There's about like 35 in there or something like that, just a bunch of video essays from my first time read. And if you want, you can also become a member, which will give you access to the videos early, as well as members only content as soon as I start reading the second book, and also potential to join a book club that I'm going to start and host in our Discord very shortly when we have enough members. But back to the Great River, or Anduin. The first thing I want to talk about that happens is the demeanor of Boromir. I was talking about this with some people in our Discord as I was reading this live, but I think at this point in the story, I am ready to argue that Boromir was possessed. Listen to the language that it uses to describe Boromir. Merry and Pippin in the middle boat were ill at ease, for Boromir sat muttering to himself, sometimes biting his nails as if some restlessness or doubt consumed him, sometimes seizing a paddle and driving the boat close behind Aragorn's. Then Pippin, who sat in the bow looking back, caught a queer gleam in his eye as he peered forward, gazing at Frodo. I think you could easily assume, as I think most of the fandom will, that Boromir is naturally just sliding into temptation here and in the next chapter, when I kind of assume his fall will take place, and he just acquiesces to the temptation of the ring. I am not at that place in the books yet. And yes, my love of Boromir surely is just leading me to justify his fall to some extent. Or not really justify it, but rather just explain it. But to me, this seems like some kind of possession. I don't know. And while Boromir is absolutely not free of guilt or culpable for his own decisions that he has made, and that he will make, I probably would say that maybe just being in the presence of the ring is a dangerous thing. And while I love him dearly, I'd also say that he's the weakest mentally in the whole company. Every single one of them, including Merry and Pippin, seem wiser and much more secure in themselves than Boromir. Boromir is loud, boisterous, and thinks he could take on a Balrog. And I love him for that, but he just seems a bit more insecure. Kind of like unsure of who he is. And I'd probably say that here the ring seems to be using that to its own advantage, almost like wooing Boromir to take possession of the ring, kind of like using the weakest link in the fellowship. Because I think we all know what would happen if he took it. Again, I'm unsure of this because I just don't know the aura that the ring has, but his behavior is very abnormal. Even for someone who is just mulling something over. It, to be completely honest, looks like some kind of psychosis or some kind of possession of some sort. When has Boromir ever muttered to himself? Or when has he constantly bit his nails? What the heck is his logic behind rowing behind Aragorn? Is he looking to confess his sins to the leader of the group? Is he looking to take the ring straight from Frodo in the boat? Pippin also notices a look that doesn't seem fitting with Boromir. A queer gleam in his eye. It's not just like a normal gleam that he gives people in the Fellowship. It's a queer gleam. Now, I fully know and understand that this could just be a deep temptation, but it just seems to be out of left field. Again, maybe my love of Boromir is blinding me, but not really that he's tempted to get the ring, but his behavior. He never really shows this previously, and perhaps Galadriel's vision really messed him up. But I think if that's the case, that this is all a result of Galadriel invading his mind, I'd probably ask what's the difference between someone rashly acting because of a vision or going mad because of a vision. Boromir, to me, at this moment, seems like he's going down a path of the latter. He feels like he's possessed and going mad, and I am almost dreading reading the next chapter for fear of what will happen. I know you all know the ring, how it really works and everything like that, so help me out on this one. Can the ring whisper to someone who isn't its bearer? Not really the right word, but you kind of know what I mean. And I don't know, I'm just kind of recording this too, just so you guys know my reaction on the next, because again, I am kind of dreading the fall of Boromir. I love him, and I'm curious how my position is going to change in the next chapter when I actually read of his fall. So when we get there, we'll get there, but it'll probably be in like another few days. Because I have one more essay that I want to write in this chapter that I'll talk to you guys about at the end. Anyway, the second thing is pure speculation on my part, but in the middle of the night, when the company is floating down the river, they seem to get accosted by orcs. And as they pull their boats to the shore to defend themselves, Legolas gets up and starts knocking arrows in his bow. And then this is the paragraph that follows. Frodo looked up at the elf standing tall above him as he gazed into the night, seeking a mark to shoot at. His head was dark, crowned with sharp white stars that glittered in the black pools of the sky behind. But now, rising and sailing up from the south, the great clouds advanced, sending out dark outriders into the starry field. A sudden dread fell on the company. Elbereth Gilthanel, sighed Legolas as he looked up. Even as he did so, a dark shape like a cloud, and yet not a cloud, for it moved far more swiftly, came out of the blackness in the south, and sped toward the company, blotting out all light as it approached. Soon it appeared as a great winged creature, blacker than the pits in the night. Fierce voices rose up to greet it from across the water. Frodo felt a sudden chill running through him and clutching at his heart. There was a deadly cold, like the memory of an old wound in his shoulder. He crouched down as if to hide. Suddenly, the great bow of Lorien sang. Shrill went the arrow from the elven string. Frodo looked up. Almost above him, the winged shape swerved. There was a harsh croaking scream as it fell out of the air, vanishing down into the gloom of the eastern shore. The sky was clean again. There was a tumult of many voices far away, cursing and wailing in the darkness, and then silence. Neither shaft nor cry came again from the east that night. This has to be a fell beast, no? But this is just the beginning of my speculative point. I kind of doubt that this is the case, but maybe potentially it could be a ring wraith riding on a fell beast. I think it's either a fell beast or a ring wraith riding on a fell beast. I don't think we've really heard the Nazgul scream yet that they have in the movies. I don't think that's in the books. Maybe it is later. Maybe Tolkien explained it in a prior section that I kind of missed, but I feel like this has to be a ring wraith on his new ride. It just kind of seems controlled. Like the orcs know this thing belongs to them. I mean, it could be very well trained, I don't know, but to me this just kind of feels beyond something like a fell beast. And possibly it's a ring wraith that we see for the very first time in the books, riding a fell beast. And to me that kind of makes a little brilliant bit of foreshadowing. Because if you know nothing about these things and they kind of come up later in the books, which I'm assuming they come up later, then you read it, you might be able to remember this section and piece it together and go, hey, that was actually a Nazgul or a ring wraith or a fell beast or whatever it might be. But here, I'm debating between whether this is a fell beast or a Nazgul riding a fell beast. I don't know what else it could really be. Maybe like a young dragon or something like that, or just a huge bird that we haven't really discovered yet. It just makes sense that this is a fell beast, but I'm curious if there is a rider attached to that, namely a Nazgul or a ring wraith. I'm kind of leaning to believe that there is a Nazgul or a ring wraith attached to this thing, but I don't know. It might not be. It might just be like a well-trained fell beast that the orcs are guiding. But the last thing I found, I think is so interesting because it's in the extended cut of the movies, but it's when they discover Gollum. And this is the first time they actually name the creature. Ever since Moria, there's been this presence behind the words of the text that have creeped the reader out. So as soon as they get into Moria, Frodo kind of sees this creature and hears the like small little footfalls right behind him. And he's really the only character that hears it. You kind of assume Gandalf hears it too, and he's just being quiet about it. but it's very, very creepy. And there's a section in the Lothlorien chapter that is the creepiest out of everything until we get to this chapter, which is the Great River. It says in the Lothlorien chapter, something was now climbing slowly, and its breath came like a soft hissing through closed teeth. Then coming up, close to the stem, Frodo saw two pale eyes. They stopped and gazed upward, unwinking. Suddenly they turned away, and a shadowy figure slipped around the trunk of the tree and vanished. Immediately after, Haldir came climbing swiftly up through the branches. There was something in this tree that I have never seen before, he said. It was not an orc. It fled as soon as I touched the tree stem. It seemed to be wary and to have some skill in trees, or I might have thought that it was one of you hobbits. Ugh, how creepy is that? And then in the Great River, there's another section when Frodo and Sam discover that Gollum is following them. And they decide to pull shifts in the night to keep each other safe. And this is what the text says. Minutes or hours passed slowly, and nothing happened. Frodo was just yielding to the temptation to lie down again when a dark shape, hardly visible, floated close to one of the moored boats. A long whitish hand could be dimly seen as it shot out and grabbed the gunwale. Two pale lamp-like eyes shone coldly as they peered inside, and then they lifted and gazed up at Frodo on the eyot. They were not more than a yard or two away, and Frodo heard a soft hiss of intaken breath. He stood up, drawing Sting from its sheath, and faced the eyes. Immediately their light was shut off. There was another hiss and a splash, and the dark log shape shot away downstream into the night. Aragorn stirred in his sleep, turned over and sat up. What is it? He whispered, springing up and coming to Frodo. I felt something in my sleep. Why have you drawn your sword? Gollum, answered Frodo. Or at least so I guess. Ah, said Aragorn. So you know about our little footpad, do you? He paddled after us all through Moria and right down to Nimrudel. First off, Aragorn, of course, knows about this, but you could not tell the company? Are you kidding me? That seems like vital information for them to know. But I want to highlight the brilliance of this little bit of horror writing that Tolkien is using in order to advance the story forward and for you not to get bored in little urges of the journey. I think it's a brilliant storytelling device. Again, they're on a journey. There needs to be some sense of urgency, especially if you don't want this to just feel like a Pilgrim's Progress kind of story where the characters just kind of encounter a new challenge every chapter. There are books that are decent that are like that, but Tolkien does something that seems to tie in the journey much, much better. And it gives it much more tension. Rather than just giving them a new challenge each chapter, he just puts something to follow the company. So that every single chapter there's a brief mention of this creature that Frodo sees, or another character mentions, or that gets pointed out for how strange it looks. So throughout reading, you just kind of feel this dread that is slowly approaching or creeping behind the company. And I think it's a brilliant way to keep the reader engaged. Because the whole time, I'm not really thinking about what is coming next, but rather, I'm just watching out for what's behind. Because that feels like the creepiest and the biggest threat for the world of Middle-earth at the moment. It's like when you run up your stairs in the middle of the night and you're terrified someone's going to chase you. That's what this feels like every single chapter that I go in. It's just a creepy presence that terrifies me. And it's a phenomenal way to keep tension in a story where there's a long journey and there might be a lot of like lulls in the story. I found myself only thinking about that creepy thing following them. And now we have a name for it. Gollum. I love this writing so much. And the last thing on his writing, if you think for a second I'm not going to write an essay about Aragorn being erect when he sees the Argonath men, you have another thing coming. Stay tuned for that little piece of interpretive license tomorrow. But make sure you subscribe and like the video, and I'll see you in the next one. And if you want to become a member or donate to a video, you can as well. That would be incredible. See you in the next one.